Hi, and welcome to the Human Side of Business podcast. I'm Ange McCabe, CEO and co-founder of Intuitive Performance. I'm a performance coach, HR professional, whole person leadership facilitator, and your host. The Human Side of Business podcast is fueled by the genuine curiosity to understand how personal characteristics and skills can be leveraged to drive individual and team performance, tangible outcomes, and ultimately organizational success within business. Each podcast is devoted to sharing knowledge, expanding our learning edges, and exploring the trends in corporate culture towards growing the emotional intelligence of organizations. I'm so glad you're here. Hi there, this is Ange McCabe, CEO and co-founder of Intuitive Performance, where our business is the success of your business. I'm a performance coach, HR professional, facilitator, and your co-host along with Scott Rust of the Elevate Business Podcast. The Elevate Business Podcast is a journey of discovery fueled by curiosity to genuinely understand what makes people tick when it comes to their professional path, choices made, and the personal characteristics that drive performance, tangible outcomes, and ultimately success. The Elevate Business Podcast is here to promote the enormous contribution of small and medium-sized businesses around the world by exploring the actions that make a workplace successful, the trends in corporate culture towards growing the emotional intelligence of an organization, and how we build whole person leaders from the ground up. Each podcast is devoted to sharing knowledge, growing our learning edges, and honoring our passions with a special guest who has elevated their businesses, overcome obstacles, and inspires others to do the same. So glad you're here. Hi, and a warm welcome to episode number 48 of the Elevate Business Podcast. Both myself, Ange McCabe, and Scott Russ are your hosts. We have the pleasure of introducing you to Stephen Mitchley, a strategy and operations executive with extensive experience in developing new businesses and leading teams to implement strategic plans. After working as a specialist engineer for 7 years, and while at the top of his career, Stephen decided to pivot and follow his passion for broader problem solving, and now is the Chief Strategy Officer for Vitality Group, where he is responsible for digital strategy, partner development, and enhancement of the broader global Vitality product and platform. Welcome, Stephen.
Hi, Ange. That's good.
It's so great to have you. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself, Vitality, and your role, as well as the journey that's come along with it?
Yeah, sure. I describe myself as a reformed engineer. As mentioned, I used to be an engineer on the gold mines. So Anglo-American, paid for my undergraduate, and to work for them for a little bit. And after about 7 years of hopping around in engineering and really having some papers and doing a whole bunch of stuff, I thought to myself, is this it? And I was introduced to the idea of management consulting, which I thought, oh, that's nice. You don't just solve this refrigeration engineering problem, you solve like how people interact with it. And that I was gravitating towards that anyway. And I just happened to get an interview with our parent company in South Africa, Discovery Health. And we chat about things. I knew nothing about insurance. I knew nothing about systems and digital. But they felt that I might be able to do a few things. And I looked at this company. I thought, geez, the first thing they spoke about was their values. And they wanted to make people healthier. And I was really attracted to that. I was attracted to the fact that it wasn't a question of beat Coke or be the best manufacturer. Literally, it was simple values that you could subscribe to. So I joined them, and that was some 21 years ago. I've gone through the group, doing turnarounds of particular areas, helped start new businesses, etc. And landed up in the States, winding down our health plan and starting the Vitality Group here. And then, through my travels, I've moved on to gravitation towards more problem solving, which is in product. But to all of that, I think, it's unusual to be with a company for this day and age, for a company with 21 years. But I often say that I've had probably 7 careers within Discovery. I've had the opportunity to launch a credit card. I've had the opportunity to launch international travel. I've been abroad to the UK, come across here, run all sorts of items. So the diversity that I've been granted was absolutely amazing. And what really has kept me going within the company, and I've got great affinity with the company, is the steadfast belief in the values and this core purpose. You can have a good day, bad day, but at the end of the day, did you make somebody healthier? That's another thing. So and that's a little bit about my journey. And as I say, the idea of taking a discipline, say digital or global partners like Apple and Garmin and the like, and saying, well, how could those be used to fulfill the objective of making people healthier? It's a nice challenge, and it's very rewarding as well.
Okay. You might notice Ange and I are very excited here because you're talking about values and how, in this day and age, staying at an organization for 21 years is kind of unheard of, but it's because of their values, it's because of their mission that you've experienced this. So I'd like to hear a little bit more about that and what it was at first when you're looking at working with the company. What was it about their values that really attracted you, and how has that been displayed throughout the 7 careers you've had within the same organization?
Yeah, sure. So, I thought the idea of, well, you've got these values, and that's a very fresh conversation versus be the best gold producer in the world, or whatever the case may be. That was interesting. What also really attracted me to the company is I could see such a great number of things that I could solve. Now, I'm an engineer with refrigeration background. What do I know about call centers? What do I know about any of these problems? It just looked like good problems to solve. So I joined, and at our induction, so this is 8th of March 2000, I found Adrian Gore, and he was at that stage still doing the inductions, and he comes in. He was young then too. I'm trying to work out if the company aged me or if it's just chronology. But he came in, the very first thing he spoke about was the values, about how he set up, and we're only about 900 people in the company then, how he set up the business, what his thoughts were, went through the values, what they mean to him. And I remember at the time him saying, we don't expect you to stay here your whole career. So there's about a group of about 20 of us. And I thought, oh, that's an uncomfortable thing to say, but that's interesting. And he says, but we do expect you to make a difference. So while you're here, make a difference. And that really stuck with me, that here's a young CEO who's being completely honest that he's not expecting you in today's day and age to be here forever. But while you're here, really apply yourself. And I think it's only been recently that I've looked back at that, and upon reflection, I realized just how brave he was in saying that. Because there's a duality to that. It's not just we expect you to make a difference, it's also the commitment from the company that we will allow you to make the difference. And that certainly has been my experience. I mean, I've tackled really big problems for the company, and I've never felt that I was out on a limb. I've always felt incredibly supported. One of the values is liberating the best in our people. And by far, that's my favorite value. I mean, there are others like innovation and optimism. There's customer. And the values kind of play out. They form the framework for how you participate. But my favorite, hands down, is liberating the best, because it does talk to an approach of leadership, an approach to how you view your responsibility in leading folk. It's not just there's goals and objectives. It's part of the value system is that we are looking to make sure you're really getting the best for that individual, as opposed to the best out of the individual. I think it's a fundamental thing. So Scott, I mean, just in answer to your question, I could cite so many different examples where the values have manifested, and literally, I mean, we had an issue in the call centers at one stage with some people were getting ill. We weren't sure what the issue was. And Adrian, I kind of said, well, what do our values compel us to do? And the answer was shut the call center down and just take the knock. So these things, they're not just things on the wall. These expressions of the value are very real, incredibly tangible. But I mean, I'll just give you those 2 small anecdotes about the make a difference. That, as I say, upon reflection now, that I'm a little wiser than I was then. It's not just the maturity of saying, gee, make a difference, you're only going to be here a while, but the commitment to being allowed to make the difference. And I think Discovery, and Vitality in particular, just is built that way. We seek to give people opportunity to expand their talents, to grow themselves, to really mold the organization, quite frankly.
Stephen, there's a lot there. And I'm so excited about everything that you've had to say, because what you're identifying with is that it's not just about core values on a wall and occasionally spoken about in meetings. Rather, it's something that's lived and breathed by, not just by leadership, but throughout the organization. So can you give us a few examples or express to us like how, because everybody has a different lens as to what words mean or what those definitions mean. How do you align that with your team in keeping consistency between what those core values are versus what shows up on a daily basis?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think each of the values are expressed, and then what we've done quite diligently, and that they're consistent across the globe, is then give examples of those values and a narration about the value, what this practically means. And then I think, as with anything, the values change in context sometimes. So the focus on diversity and inclusion, for instance.
Yes.
By definition, our value of great people must include a narrative about diversity and inclusion. So the wording gets updated and morphs. And I think that's been the values. They started off, I think there were 7, they became 8. There's one more that's been added, but it's something that is evolving over time as opposed to a static concept or static narrative, because words change. I mean, I've been leading a charge on something which I think some people might think, oh, that's weird, but I think it is important. We often talk about whitelisting or blacklisting things in organizations, like applications, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
So I've changed the narrative to green listing and red listing, because there's a historical context to black and white, black being bad and white being good, which probably has no place in the discussion. But green and red, you get go versus stop. And I raised this, and boom, it's taken off like wildfire, and everyone's adopted it. So I think words do change in context over time, and I think with the values, these are refreshed, updated in terms of their positioning. Fortunately, we don't. I mean, I don't have to have a discussion about the values with my team because this is so pervasive. I don't have to anchor often. We're not practicing this value, because that becomes quite contrived. I think I can, and I have got examples of being asked really challenging one-on-one questions where someone's struggling with something, and I try and frame it in terms of, well, I can see how that would cause a dilemma or a conflict between these two values. Mm-hmm. So let's think through that. How would you approach that with that in mind? So it's a very real thing, but I don't think you walk around with banners and over promotion. It's more a common ethos that you subscribe to, and then if things are counter that, you can call it out, and you've got the permission space to do so. I'm very open to anyone can criticize me whether I'm being counter values. I think that would be the worst thing for me to do. Mm-hmm. When we interview people for roles, we'll talk about the values and say, if you can't subscribe to this, please don't join. You're going to hate it here. But I mean, the things are fairly simple. So I think most people go, wow, I actually could. I'd love to work with an organization that lives and breathes that. So, and I haven't really given you exactly the answer that you wanted. I don't. I think we practice the values. We reinforce them through opportunistic moments when they make sense, but not to the extent we over-branding the value, or you try too hard to force it into a hole. And I do think that words do mean a lot, and they do change over time. So the narration and the context of the values changes. Just as Discovery's now 15,000 members or people strong. We're in 30 countries. We cover like 20 million people. It's a big organization now. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. It's changed. It's evolved, and that I firmly believe, and I think our founder and co-founder Barry Schwartzberg, who runs our division, would agree that the people did make a difference. That's why we are where we are.
Right.
Globally, we're championing a lot of work around COVID support, and you look at that, and you can just see the community spirit, the looking after of the customer. Really, it's a physical manifestation of those values, rather than us needing to then go and brand that as that value action. So it talks to the values being something that's really ingrained and supported, rather than over marketed and overplayed.
Yes. And that all in itself, I was going to make a sidebar joke, Stephen, and say, hopefully you don't mind us writing an ebook about this, because it's beautifully spoken in the sense that, kind of reiterating what you're saying, you're not branding your culture, you're not forcing the culture upon your staff or your team members, but rather you're checking in with them as soon as they come through the door. Does this work for you? Is this a fit mutually? And so how you're interviewing by way of behavioral style is really setting you up for success with your team members as they're integrating or as they're mentored through your organization. And it sounds to me like it shows up in many places in the sense of just day-to-day conversations. Again, not forced upon, just done. And
exactly.
It's really interesting to hear that the correlation between how the cultural alignment is going so well and how the organization has grown over the years. To your point, 15,000 strong across 30 countries. I don't think that's by accident. I think it's by way of through performance and that cultural alignment. So it's great to hear that.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. And I must say, like with any community, I see the company as a company of people. Now, yes, we work for P2I Limited and a listed company, but it's a company of people. So you'll have pockets where there might not be they might be going through difficult periods. There might be some leadership issues, and there isn't that alignment. I mean, any of the turnarounds that I've done is you go in, you have a look at, listen to people, you have a look at what's going on, and you just come back to the values, because it's when they're not present that things are very difficult. When you have an autocratic leadership style that is counter values, when you have people saying strange things like, "Well, that person's not working, so I muzzled them," and I'm like, I'm backing with what you've just said. I don't think you really fit in, given that that's a counter-value statement. You see, if you've got that framework, it's actually quite simple to pick up where the dissonance is. So then turnarounds become, leading a direction becomes quite simple, because if we all believe in these values and this purpose, then it's a question about what actions would align us to succeed in that space. Mm-hmm. As opposed to saying, "Oh, you've all done something wrong, and there's a problem here." It's a very different narrative, I think.
One point I do want to acknowledge again, Stephen, is the fact that how I guess this value-based culture actually manifests itself in the way that how you interact with your customers. And I think you touched on that earlier in terms of supporting the customers throughout this past 18 months and the troubles and challenges that they've been going through, which I think is really interesting. And you mentioned the simplicity of having kind of, I'll call it like a North Star, this framework that is easily utilized and leveraged and kind of applied throughout the organization. I'd be curious to get your take as to, it sounds very simple, but what advice would you give to other organizations in kind of implementing this? If they're recognizing that the words on the wall don't necessarily match the actions and behaviors within their company.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I wasn't the author of the value, so I can't comment to how you came up with them at all. But I can say, if you're leading a whole bunch of folk and what you have on the wall isn't resonating, then you go back to the wall and say, well, is this the truth? Is this honestly what our values are? Mm-hmm. And if so, then hold the mirror to yourself and say, well, am I living those? And are folk in the organization allowed to live those? Do they have the permission space to live those? I think that's also important. It comes back to my question about making the difference. Now, if you're saying that the value is liberating the best, there's a counterfoil to that, which is, as a participant in this journey of working with the company for a period of time, I can expect that somebody is going to take the time to liberate the best in me. So it's not just the fact that we have these values. It's also it sets a framework for how people expect to be managed. Mm-hmm. So I think if organizations are struggling with this, I would suggest exactly that. That look at the words. Is that really what you want to getting to, or have you socialized this? Have you got buy-in to these values? And just flip it around and say, am I living them, and are others actually able to live them or not? Because if they're not, then clearly you've got a massive disconnect. And I do think simple values sound good, but if you don't have a framework in place and a process in place to actually make them manifest, then you probably are going to struggle a little bit, and there might be a bit of resentment and people going, well, that's just something on the wall. It doesn't meaningfully implement or affect what I'm doing at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. And that certainly resonates with us, Stephen, and couldn't agree with you more around those thoughts. When it comes to your vision with your team and how you further create that environment for them to thrive, can you tell us a little bit more about that? And also layering in the drastic changes that have happened over the past 18 months with that.
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, we've got a very diverse team. We in the product space, we've got brilliant designers, product designers. We've got focusing on behavioral change, content management, how to nudge people to the right outcomes. We've got a team that focus on global partners, so all the partners that make the program exciting and appealing to our membership. We also have a customer experience unit that focuses like a laser beam on the end consumer. End consumers delight in the product or lack thereof, and trying to resolve that. So it's a pretty diverse team, and each leader of the subset clearly has their own expertise, own skill set. But I mean, my focus honestly isn't really about the team's performance so much as the ability for each of the leaders within the group to make a change and drive a change on the organization. So with everyone, I've started discussions, or I started the discussion with them as being, okay, so fast forward a few years, what do you want to have achieved, and how would you want the organization to have changed? So for this function to really work, how does the organization have to change? What needs to be different? Mm-hmm. And then I facilitate that. I help them get to that spot. I mean, if I take design as an example, our designers are brilliant, but for the longest time they were plugged into the software development life cycle as people who make pretty pictures. Actuaries say this is the product, someone writes the rules, and then these guys design what that looks like. Somebody goes, yay or no, yay or no, yay or no. That's terrible design. We've taken that practice to design being right at the front of the experience, proper design thinking, really evolved the maturity of design as a practice with diverse voices in the exploration of design, member research at the start of the product, resonance testing at the start of the project. None of that was my idea. Mm-hmm. That was Sue's vision of where she wanted, and she's got a strategy of where she is trying to take design thinking and design systems. So my role really is to facilitate liberating the best in her, mm-hmm. and not in a paternal sense at all. I don't want this to come across as condescending. I know that we can be so much stronger if she really is able to deliver what she believes the organization needs. So my role is to make sure that the organization can connect and be led.
Right.
And if the ideas are wrong, clearly I'll give some guidance on this isn't going to be work because I don't believe in it. But if I do believe in it, I champion that and give her platforms to be able to have that change manifested. The other folk in the team, Nikki, Christine, all have the expertise in exactly the same thing. My vision is for them all to be leaders, global leaders for the group, not just for Vitality Group, but truly in the sense of helping South Africa, helping the UK, helping all 30 markets. They currently cover about 25 or so, and being seen as making a difference to the organization, for the organization. Mm-hmm. And what I do see is each of them have embraced that with their own staff, and they're all have their functions. They're all trying to make a difference. And it's not uniquely me. I mean, this is what liberating the best means for us. It also means, quite frankly, and it's very selfishly, I get to interact with everybody in the broader team on their pet projects, listening to what they're doing, coaching a little bit, learning more, and seeing, well, this is your thoughts. How would that fit in? And then pulling it out and making sure that I facilitate that happening. So I get to apply my brain all day long, learning from a whole whack of different people from different skill sets. And it's all around channeling, harvesting energy around that common purpose towards driving the organization where it should be going. And then at a macro level, you can take that in and say, gee, we need to adjust the strategy this way because this is more important to the customer, or this is a pain point. So not sure if I answered your question. It was kind of a long-winded way of what is the vision for the team? It's that everyone is truly making a difference for the organization, and the environment is around a supportive style in getting that done.
Right.
And ironing out the burrs when the organization sometimes isn't ready for it.
Yeah. And Stephen, essentially what you're describing is the real life example of transformational leadership. You're leading from behind. You're coaching people. You're giving them the space and the autonomy through your company values and visions to be able to not just lead within, but also lead towards client success and, impacting their greater geographic areas and where they reside. That's phenomenal. One thing that kept coming up for me in helping other leaders with regards to this whole concept of transformational leadership and, quite frankly, letting go. So giving that space for autonomy. If you don't believe in something, or you can see that maybe they're not set up for success, how do you let that go and kind of let them live and guide them through that?
Yeah, that's probably the toughest thing. I mean, sometimes people do need to fail. They do need to explore to get learnings. Sometimes you just don't have the time for that, either for their development or, quite frankly, the business does. And so I think that's a bit of a, I don't think it's a science. I think it is a little bit of an art.
Right.
I'm quite happy for folks to explore things, but if it's going to result in any harm to themselves or, just complete waste of time, I'd rather have the discussion and let them try and convince me that it's not. Not say no, but rather say, have you thought about?
Right.
I think when I was younger, I particularly when you went to tough situations, I'm quite naturally a crisis leader. If there's a crisis, I can quickly assimilate what's going on, say, right, there's a problem. This is what we need to be doing. Are you all on board with this? And let's get going. And you can sustain that for about 3 days. And then you realize, well, that's an awful way to lead. It's great when there's a massive crisis, like one of our partners went under, so there's an impact. It's okay. But you're actually a lot stronger from saying, look, I've got that experience, but let's not try and impose it. Let's rather say, right, this is what I see. How might you approach that? And take more of a coaching listening style. And then you can give people pointers. But I do think it's a bit of a balance sometimes. I'm not a believer in saying, well, let people fail completely and it's for their good. Because I think in certain instances that's just not safe. And I would never put somebody on a promotion platform. In other words, have them take things to an executive committee without making sure that they are equipped to do that.
Right.
Because that could just be soul destroying. That's a very practical example. I mean, you want people to promote, be uncomfortable, but uncomfortable enough that they grow. Not, I don't think it's in me to let people fail miserably. Just so let me pick up the pieces. But I'm sure that's not what you're saying.
Exactly.
That's fantastic. And what's interesting is in your description of, empowering your team and creating an environment, I don't think I heard the word manage once. It was about sitting back and listening. It was asking questions. It wasn't telling them no, but rather asking them further insights as to, well, have you thought about this? Have you looked at it from this perspective? And trying to get them to come to the place of understanding rather than imposing your own belief systems on people. Which I think
I think that's fair. But I must say, I can be quite decisive when I need to be. And it's something that I have to guard against. I have to guard against often just saying, yeah, that won't work. But I think with maturity, certainly when I was my first 5 years at the company, if I thought something was going to work, I'd say, this is how it's going to work, and we should do it this way because, and it was selling. Not telling, but selling. I think I've matured a little bit more to say, well, if I have an insight, I'd rather approach it slightly differently so that there's a common understanding. Obviously, in certain instances, it is quite easy to say, okay, that's not quite right, and this is why. But that's very different. Within the technical nature of the work, you can spot something that isn't quite right, and people are quite open to that. That's very different when you come to helping someone develop or come up with ideas. I mean, something you touched on, Scott, with with the end consumer and end customer, I think it's part of our value system as well. But I do think the care that we take with growing, but within the organization, we take the same approach with our clients, whether they're a corporate who's buying the product or an individual. I think you always have to try and put yourself in that person's shoes. So going out to someone saying, "Oh, I've got a product and this is what you need," I don't think is very successful. I think our best successes have been going out, listening to what somebody might need, playing back what you think their problems are, and then saying, well, based on that, these things have worked for us and feels like this is what we need to solve. Mm-hmm. It's a very collaborative style. Mm-hmm. I also, I think sometimes you need to be a little bit of a guppy. You need to just forget stuff because our customers don't necessarily understand what we understand. So it's quite useful, even internally as a manager in an organization, to say, well, let me forget the history. Let me just start from scratch and see this as a new person entering the organization, as a new customer entering the organization. How might I feel? And it keeps you honest, I think. I think it keeps you more tuned to, you kind of detach from your history, and it keeps you more tuned to how things are really on the ground.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that, Stephen. It's been extremely insightful. Switching gears a little bit with the last question. What are 3 words of inspiration you would want the world to hear?
That's a really tough one because I'm a wordy guy. I think learn, change, and repeat.
Okay.
So learning is about listening, not imposing, just learning as much as you can. Effect change, either change within yourself or effect the change that's required, and then start again. Mm-hmm. I think I'd be very worried if I go a week without learning something new. I think it's quite a dreary existence. I think, that's really it. Learn, change, repeat.
That's amazing. And you did it. 3 words. Learn, change, repeat. Thank you so much for joining us today, Stephen. Again, really appreciate your insights from your desk. And we really appreciate you sharing all of your performance and entrepreneurial journey insights with us as well, and for our subscribers. And for those who would like to learn more about your business, we're going to provide a link to your company's profile on the Elevate Business Podcast title page. Take good care.
Fantastic. Thanks very much.
Thanks for listening to the Elevate Business Podcast. I hope you enjoyed the program. You can subscribe to future podcasts at intuitiveperformance.com, where you can also sign up for webinars and learn more about professional coaching and our facilitation solutions available to help fire up your whole person performance skills and drive actions for success. Until next time, stay true to you and take care of each other. We are all better together. Thanks for listening to the Human Side of Business podcast. I'm glad you could join us. If you enjoyed today's episode and want to stay updated with our latest content, make sure to visit our website. The link can be found in the episode description, where you can subscribe to the podcast, sign up for our newsletter, and learn more about our whole person leadership services. Sounds interesting? Explore the Whole Person Leadership Cohort by Intuitive Performance, a unique program that offers unparalleled support to managers on every step of their leadership journey. Our program features evidence-based assessments, workbooks, group coaching, and interactive learning experiences to help you level up your leadership skills. Reach out today to apply to one of our upcoming cohorts. Until next time, take care and stay curious.